All right. So again, a conditional statement is a statement that's written in an if-then format. So an example, if you look at example 1 there, it says, if you have no more than 2 absences and a B average, then you can exempt your final. So we have an if-then statement there. All right. There's the if. There's the then. So this is a type of conditional statement. Now, they're broken into 2 parts, these conditional statements are. They're written as a, we have the hypothesis part, and we also have the conclusion. So the hypothesis part is which part do you think? It's the if. Good. It's the phrase following, but not including the word if. So the phrase following, but not including the word if. So then we have the conclusion. So our conclusion is what?
The phrase after the then.
Good, the phrase that's following then. All right? And it does not include that word then. All right? So the phrase following, but not including the word then. So in the first example there, it says state the hypothesis and conclusion of the following conditional statement that's below. So simply state that. On your paper there, go through and state what the hypothesis is and what the conclusion would be. All right, so what's our hypothesis? Good, so you have no more than 2 absences. And a B average. Now our conclusion would be what? You can exempt your final. So that's our first one. Now sometimes it's good just to underline the hypothesis. You have no more than 2 absences and a B average. Then we'd simply just circle our conclusion. All right. Sorry, it's lagging. today, getting up there. Right. So go ahead and take a look at the second example now. So our second example, rewrite the statement below again as a conditional statement, and then state the hypothesis and the conclusion. Looking at this one then, how would we rewrite that as a conditional statement?
If a car has 4 brakes, then it is considered a menace on the highway.
So if a car with poor brakes
If a car has 4 brakes,
if a car has poor brakes, then
it is considered a menace on the highway.
good. All right, good. So what's our hypothesis?
If a car has 4 brakes,
So a car has poor brakes. So our conclusion is it is a menace on the highway. So let's go ahead and look at the next example. On example 3, it says rewrite that statement again as a conditional statement, and then once again state the hypothesis and conclusion. So I'll give you just a second to look at that. All right, so on this one, what would our conditional statement be?
if the day ends in Y, then Mrs. Ellen's class receives homework.
Good, so if a day ends in Y, then Miss Ellison
Class receives
whoa. So if a day ends in Y, then Miss Ellison's class receives homework. So again, the hypothesis on this one, now that we're up and rolling, a day, what's our hypothesis? A day ends in Y. On days that end with Y. All right. Then, conclusion is Miss Ellison's class receives homework. So now a converse statement. All right, that's a conditional statement. So for a converse statement, all right, it's formed by switching the hypothesis and the conclusion of a conditional statement. All right, so a converse statement is formed by switching the hypothesis and conclusion of a conditional statement. So on example 4 there, it says, state the converse of the conditional statement that we had in example 1. So if we go back and look at example 1 again. All right. Our example 1 conditional statement. If you have no more than 2 absences and a B average, then you can exempt your final. So if we're going to switch that now.
You can be exempt from your final if you have no more than 2 absences in the average.
Good. So if you can exempt your final, then you have no more than 2 absences and a B average. So using that same thing, go ahead and look at example 5. So take a look at example 5. Okay, so how would I go through and rewrite? Let's see, first off, example 5, write the converse and conditional statement below, and then tell whether it's a true or false statement. Right, so the converse of that is what? All right. If it is an obtuse angle, then it has a measure of 120 degrees. So is that true or not?
It depends.
If it is an obtuse angle, then it has a measure of 120.
No.
No, that's not true. Why is it not true?
Like past 90, like below 180.
Right, anything between 90 and below 180 is. But what it told us is that it had to be exactly 120, and that wasn't true. So a counterexample would be an example that follows the hypothesis, but not the conclusion. That's a counterexample. So a definition of that is an example that follows it's an example that follows the hypothesis but not the conclusion. So a counterexample, it says, if we're thinking about that here, what would a counterexample be? That just means to rewrite it any way that we want to. Rewrite, notice again, we rewrite the hypothesis. Right. So which part's the hypothesis? It follows the hypothesis, but not the conclusion. So for example, I could write, it has a measure of, let's say a counterexample, let's say it follows a measure of 121, right, for example. An angle of 121 degrees. All right, there's a counterexample, right? Isn't a 121 degree angle also considered an obtuse angle? Isn't it? Right? Okay, so there's a counterexample. There, I proved why it was false. It wasn't 120 there. There's 121. That's still obtuse. Remember, there's an infinite number of angles that could be obtuse, as long as they're between 90 and 180. You could have 90.00001. That's an obtuse angle. Now, this next part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand out to you a kind of a start on the type of examples that you'll be working on tomorrow as well. So we'll get started on them now. We'll start working through one of them together. All right. It's kind of some of those situational things where you can determine who did what order did it occur, and things like that.